Thank you. Now it's time to move to the Q&A session, and I will start with EPP, with Markus Ferber. You have 1.5 minutes for the question, 3 minutes for the answer, the possibility to have a follow-up of 1 minute, and 2 minutes for the answer. The floor is yours, dear Markus.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Vorsitzende, Frau Präsidentin. Sie haben ja jetzt die Instrumente noch einmal dargestellt, und wir stellen ja auch fest, dass wir steigende Verschuldungen in den Mitgliedstaaten haben. Und da gibt es ja Stimmen, die fordern ganz offen, dass die Europäische Zentralbank entweder die Zinsen senken sollte oder auch wieder verstärkt Anleiheaufkaufprogramme starten sollte, um die Finanzierungskosten hochverschuldender Staaten zu senken oder auch um die Spreads etwas einzudämmen in den Zinslasten verschiedener Mitgliedstaaten. Aber auch nicht nur innerhalb der EU, auch außerhalb der EU gibt es ja starken Druck auf die Zentralbanken. Ich denke da insbesondere an die USA. Deswegen meine Frage angesichts weiterhin hoher öffentlicher Schulden, steigender Zinslasten im Euroraum: Wie stellen Sie sicher, dass Sie derartigen Druck standhalten können und die Idee der monetären Dominanz nicht ausgehöhlt wird? That was very short, Ms. President.
Well, thank you so much for your question, Mr. Ferber. I can assure you that when we decide our monetary policy stance, we are doing exactly what I explained, which is that we look at all the data, we analyze the risk associated with our inflation outlook, we study very carefully whatever instruments and tools we have to be for instance, or wages. We have a lot of backward-looking instruments, but we have also built some tools that help us to understand exactly what is likely to happen. So we look at all of that. And on a meeting-by-meeting basis, looking at inflation outlook with the risk associated to it, the underlying inflation and the transmission, we look at all those three. We look at the objective that we have set for ourselves, which is the 2% medium term. We look at our primary objective, which is price stability, and we make the decision. So we regard that as mission critical for the ECB. There are other missions critical, but they are in the hands of other institutions. And in particular, when it comes to public finances, it is not for the central bank to redress the public finances or to accommodate any particular policy. It is for those in charge of public finances to actually select the investment that will make the economy more productive while being attentive to the debt sustainability of the economy. So we are not fiscally dependent, if you will.
Follow-up?
Ja, dann fange ich gleich mit der Anschlussfrage an. Wir haben ja auch auf europäischer Ebene die Fiskalregeln angepasst, dass Ausgaben für die Verteidigung im Rahmen der Fiskalregeln nicht angerechnet werden. Das heißt, wir gehen davon aus oder müssen davon ausgehen, dass wir in den kommenden Jahren steigende Verschuldungen in den Mitgliedstaaten haben. Indem Sie ja sagen, Sie nehmen die Fakten hier in Betracht, die zu betrachten sind. Wie sehen Sie die Schuldentragfähigkeit der Mitgliedstaaten und was hat das dann für Implikationen auf die Geldpolitik, wenn Sie unabhängig entscheiden?
If I take the example of the country that you know best and that I have the pleasure to live in, we try to understand exactly what is the investment program, when it is going to have a bearing on the economy, what kind of investment will be made, and will it be in the nature of productive investment? Will it be sourced in Europe or outside Europe? And we try to anticipate what exactly will be the impact on the economy so that we can adjust the projection that we have for growth. Now, of course, it will have an impact on the debt level. It will have an impact on the debt sustainability, on the service of the debt as well. But how that financing is invested will matter a lot. And those are the various items that we try to take into account in our analysis of how effective, how productive the investment will be for the economy of that country, but also, as you know, there will be spillover and probably an encouragement to other countries to also go along. Thank you.
Thank you. For the S&D, Jonas Fernandez.
Muchas gracias, Chair. Bienvenida, Presidenta. Hablaré en castellano. Es cierto que en los próximos días conoceremos la propuesta de la Comisión para avanzar en la consolidación de los mercados de capitales, y estará bien. Pero en las últimas semanas he percibido en algunas de sus declaraciones públicas una posición muy vocal a favor de avanzar más rápido y en otros sectores vinculados al mercado único. La competitividad pasa por más mercado único. El objetivo primario de su institución es la inflación, y más mercado único también ayudaría a contener la inflación. Me gustaría preguntarle cómo ve, qué respuesta encuentra a esas exigencias de más mercado único, porque algunos creemos que son un poco vagas todavía. Gracias.
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Fernandez. You are correct that in order to fight inflation and in order to deliver on price stability, we have to look at multiple elements. We have to look at the activity, we have to look at the risk bearing on the activity, we have to look at the labour market, we have to look at all sorts of expectations matter a lot. And in relation to growth and activity, we were shocked several times in the last few years. The latest shock that we suffered was the shock of tariff, for instance, when moving from 1 plus a little percent to 13.1% was obviously a shock that affected our trade activity with one of our major partners, the largest trading partner we had. So it begs the question of how do we address that, and how do we deal with a reduction, most likely, of the trade activity, which is one of the drivers of growth. And then you have to turn to your own market and to look at what the domestic market has to offer. And our job as European Central Bank, we look at the whole euro area and see what additional growth could be leveraged out of our economies. And I don't know if you remember, but the IMF had produced a study which concluded with the fact that there was an equivalent of 40% tariff on good trade within the euro area and 100% equivalent tariffs on services traded within the euro area. So when we saw that study, we were a little bit shocked by the fact that we were inflicting upon ourselves those kinds of obstacles and barriers. And we conducted a similar study, trying to be a little bit more refined, more sophisticated, taking a little bit more time as well to get to the bottom of it. And we came actually with numbers that were not only of the same magnitude, but higher. So the latest study that was produced, I think it was in the Economic Journal, was 65% quasi-tariffs for goods and 110% on services. And it doesn't. Well, our great economists then try to measure how much would it take in order to offset the negative impact of additional tariffs to compensate for that loss of activity. And it's fascinating because when you look, and that's the beauty of the diversity of the euro area. If all members of the euro area were to apply the same barriers as the Netherlands, we would eliminate the negative impact of the additional tariff from the United States onto euro area exports. And it's not even that. It's if we did only a quarter of that effort, we would set it off. So it's with that in mind that whenever I'm asked for my views, I say the single market is not just for monetary purposes. The single market should be really the delivery of the promise of Jacques Delors way back, when we affirmed that goods, services, capital and people should move freely. We haven't realized that, and there is a massive potential to be had as a result. And I'm not going to repeat the reports of the great Letta and the great Draghi. They said it, they documented it, but what we can do in addition to that is measure how much we inflict upon ourselves.
Yeah. Follow up,
Sí, muchas gracias. Y en virtud de estos números producidos por el Fondo Monetario o por el propio BCE sobre los aranceles internos del mercado único, ¿no considera que la agenda de la Comisión exclusivamente centrada o casi exclusivamente centrada en simplificar las normas estrictamente comunitarias, aunque necesario, es absolutamente, en fin, no diré que inútil, pero marginal a los efectos de los problemas que realmente debemos resolver en el funcionamiento del mercado único? Gracias.
You know, I don't want to insert myself in policies that are not of our responsibilities, but the competitiveness compass, which was intended, I think, to be a translation of the prescriptions of the Draghi report, is a set of measures that would be helpful to achieve better competitiveness, more single market. I don't think it can be reduced only to simplification, which is a big word that covers lots of other things. If I look at what I know better, which is what we do at the European Central Bank, and if I look in particular at work that has recently been done on simplification of the regulatory framework, of the reporting framework, of the supervision framework, we are at the juncture of two forces, if you will. There's the European force, which tries to harmonize, set frameworks, organize in a sort of more consistent way the regulatory requirements and the supervision requirements in the financial sector. But the second force is actually the national force at each level of each member states, where additional layers, special requirements, further licensing, special permission are added to what has already been harmonized. So my take, if the same phenomenon applies in other sectors, is that charity begins at home, and member states should be looking at what they have added, how they have supplemented, sometimes with good intention, but with a limited result in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, just as much as the European institutions, including mine, should look at how as effective one can be without layers of duplication or additional unnecessary reporting, for instance.
Thank you. For PFE, Nico Gyuri.
Thank you. Madam President, welcome back. Let me ask you about two very timely issues. The first one is the Capital Market Union. I think we all agree that a competitive and well-functioning EU capital market is essential for supporting investments and growth. However, the experience of the 2008 financial crisis remains a critical reminder of how excessive risk-taking, insufficient capital requirements and complex securitization structures can undermine financial stability with far-reaching consequences. In this regard, how does the ECB assess the risk related to the reduction of certain capital requirements in the Commission's current securitization package? And based on this assessment, do you think that the Commission proposal found the right balance between loosening and financial stability, or there is still room for further lowering capital requirements and by this helping a bit the growth? And my second question would be on the financial transaction tax, which has been brought back. It's in the air in this House, even as a new potential own resource of the EU budget. How do you think this idea is compatible with the plan of the Savings and Investment Union, and what kind of impact it would have on this plan? Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for your two questions. I may have missed the first part of your second question, but you'll take me back to it. So on the securitization, so we believe that it's, and from the discussions that we've had with banks, from the understanding that we have of where the project is, we believe that securitization is one of the components of the Capital Market Union. And it's certainly one that was most welcomed by banks for I mean, one of the reasons possibly is that by removing some of the risks from their balance sheet, it will then help them provide more funding to the economy and increase the volume of lending that is out there. So it's a tool, and it plays a key role as far as bank support for the project is concerned. And it's key to manage banks' capital and funding needs and to support lending to the real economy and create opportunities. So, on November 11th, so not so long ago, the ECB communicated its views and shared them with the Commission on its securitization proposal. The ECB generally approved the proposal, welcomed it, and praised key aspects of the reform, such as more proportionality in investor due diligence and targeted simplification of disclosure requirements. The ECB also provided some technical suggestions on risk retention rules, on criteria for simple, transparent and standardized securitization in particular, and on definition of public securitizations. And we are particularly attentive to the follow-up to those comments and whether synthetic securitization in particular will be appropriately measured in terms of risks. Now, at the beginning of your second question, I've lost it. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. So it was about the financial transaction tax. This idea has been brought back in this House in the context of as a new or potential own resource. And I wanted to ask your opinion about whether it's a timely issue, whether it would be good, because I have very strong doubts what impact it would have in the plan of the Savings and Investment Union.
You know, as President of the ECB, I don't have fixated views on this transaction tax. It's been around, it's been promoted for decades as this. I think Tobin was the one who sort of threw it in the machine as the little sand that would slow it down. So I don't have a specific view, and you know, I think that anything that facilitates the localization in Europe of the use of savings, of the investment in appropriate and well-calibrated financial instrument will be welcome. Anything that goes against it will not necessarily be helpful.
Thank you so much for the answer. And just a follow-up question. You were speaking about the importance of the effective transmission of your monetary policy, which I fully agree. Could you be a bit more specific? Which are the major impediments to the proper monetary transmission of your policies? If you can name some concrete things which you should be dismantled. Thank you.
Well, there are two elements that are sort of reinforcing each other and are mutually inclusive and needed. It's the stance. You know, in essence, it's what decisions are made in order to deliver on the mission of price stability, and it's the transmission, because you can decide all the stances in the world. If it doesn't transmit to the economy and throughout the euro area, then you haven't achieved the results that you expected. So, you know, you can think of multiple impediments to transmission, but what we are particularly keen on doing is measuring whether our monetary policy stance transmits. And I've used in those days the upstream, downstream, the speed at which it transmits. And what we are seeing at the moment, certainly, and what we have seen for quarters and quarters, is very good transmission of our monetary policy. When you start seeing the financial sector, for instance, in its lending capacity to either households or corporates, not moving when we are moving, up or down, doesn't matter, then you know that you have an issue of transmission, and you have to be attentive to the causes of that failure to transmit. And I think that in all instances we have the tools to respond to that.
For ECR, Stéphane Nicolas Bartolika.
Thank you very much. Madam President, welcome back to the European Parliament. I have a question on the rise of cases of debanking, or sometimes described as de-risking, a practice done by commercial banks in the EU. So under the ECB's single supervisory mechanism framework, commercial banks have repeatedly violated EU citizens' fundamental right to access the financial system, enshrined in the Payment Accounts Directive. When banks close a client's account, this is often done with no explanation. It is happening with increased frequency throughout the EU, and this simply disallows citizens to function properly on a daily basis. What can the ECB do to prevent this practice from happening? It's, in my view, a clear abuse of power by the banks. I think many citizens feel that this is being done simply because they have the wrong political opinions. I've hosted an event here where journalists and activists gave testimony to what happened to them. Once one bank closes their accounts, it's very difficult for them to find another bank where they can do business. So what can the ECB do to mitigate the consequences of this practice and to prevent the further abuse of power by commercial banks? Thank you.
Well, thank you. You know, I was tempted to tell you my story, but I won't. Because I did face that situation on an account that was not particularly well credited, I will say, and given my sort of exposed personality status and the requirements that go with it, and I was, you know, asked to politely to close my account with that institution. So I'm not going to tell you that it doesn't happen. And it's sometimes the case, I'm sure, that some institution, when they measure the cost-benefit of a particular account, decide that it's probably better to close than to keep open. Is it a good practice? I don't think so. What can the European Central Bank do? Not much. At least for my central banking activity, in the supervisory domain, I'm sure that our supervisors can be very attentive to the risk of exclusion of a population. But what I can assure you is that the digital euro, for which we have responsibility, will at least address that issue of exclusion, because it will be an inclusive mechanism that will enable people who are not bankable or who are not banked because they choose not to actually have access to our currency, to the euro, and to the management of the euro. So, in a way, the digital euro in its functionalities will actually address a practice that is producing the exclusion that is not appropriate. So that's what we can do.
Do you want to follow up? You want to follow up? It's fine? Okay, so we now move to the Renew Group with Stéphanie Yoncourtin.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Madame la Présidente Lagarde, merci à nouveau d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui. L'Europe est un tournant stratégique, un tournant pour rattraper son retard en matière financière, numérique, industrielle, et un tournant aussi au moment où les grandes puissances économiques mondiales accélèrent massivement leurs investissements dans l'intelligence artificielle, et pendant que les États-Unis et la Chine transforment leur économie à grande vitesse, l'Europe peine à suivre et fait face à un vrai risque de décrochage. Et vous avez récemment indiqué, je cite, que l'Europe a raté le virage de l'IA et nous devons lever les obstacles qui freinent cette transformation, sinon nous risquons de laisser passer la vague d'adoption de l'IA et compromettre l'avenir de l'Europe. Et Mario Draghi a aussi rappelé récemment que l'IA se répand dans l'économie beaucoup plus rapidement que les révolutions technologiques précédentes et que l'écart entre les pays qui embrassent l'innovation et ceux qui hésitent va se creuser considérablement. Dans ce contexte, j'ai deux questions. D'abord, quel levier concret l'Union européenne doit-elle actionner? Quels obstacles devons-nous lever pour éviter ce décrochage face aux États-Unis et à la Chine dans le domaine de l'IA? Et puis deuxièmement, est-ce que l'IA joue un rôle au sein de la BCE dans votre mission de stabilité financière et de supervision bancaire? Et si oui, lequel? Merci.
Merci beaucoup de votre question à laquelle je vais répondre en anglais pour que ce soit facilement accessible pour tous sans recourir à la traduction. So what are the obstacles to the adoption of major innovation? I would say, first and foremost, the capacity to invest. Because in order to innovate, which will indeed improve the productivity, money is needed. I think we have the intelligence, we have the talent. There are multiple examples of startups in Germany, in France, in Spain, in various corners of Europe, everywhere actually, where talent is there, where innovation is created. And yet you, as well as we, have multiple examples of those startups that try to scale up, do not have access to the second or third round of financing and go somewhere else. So my humble analysis, looking at flows of money, is to strongly encourage and request and beg that every effort is made in order to create in Europe a capital market union that will facilitate the capacity of innovators to be financed here and for venture capitalists to actually have an easy way in and out if that is necessary. We don't have that in the same proportion. And when you look at numbers, you see that ever since the big wave of innovation caused by Internet, we have gradually over the course of time lost productivity relative to the United States. And when you look at what is causing it, of course we have good universities, as they do. Of course we have great talents, as they do. If we compare just with the US, I'm not talking about China for the moment. But what we are missing is this moment when a strong financial push is needed in order for the startup to scale up and become one of those licornes that we so badly need. That's my view.
Do you want to follow up?
Juste peut-être sur le rôle de la BCE en matière justement dans cette compétence de stabilité financière. Est-ce que l'IA est déjà quelque chose qui est incorporé, qui est utilisé et quel rôle y joue?
Yes is the answer. You asked me if we use artificial intelligence, if we try to monitor its use and its impact, and the answer is on both accounts, yes. We do use artificial intelligence at the ECB. I don't make my speeches with artificial intelligence, I can promise you. I have colleagues who do that and who will tell you that, which I think is honest. But we use artificial intelligence. I'll give you an example. There is a lot of reading, fact-finding, investigation that we conduct, which is harnessed by artificial intelligence, which is analyzed by artificial intelligence. When I look at the volume of corporate documents that the SSM has to verify and navigate through in order to assess the validity, the stability, the fit and proper status of persons or corporates, artificial intelligence is capable through the large language models to really decipher, analyze and pick the information that is useful. The detection of fraud, same thing. So we use artificial intelligence in multiple instances, and we try to also encourage as many as possible the banks to use it for good purposes.
Thank you. So I don't think there is anyone for the Greens, so we will move to the left with Pasquale Tredico.
Thank you, Madam Chair. President Lagarde, the Italian government has introduced an amendment to the budget law declaring the gold reserve of the Bank of Italy to be property of the Italian people. This concerns about approximately 2.5 tons of gold worth about 300 billion euros, which a governing majority would like probably to make available to cover some gaps in the public budget. Actually, in your legal opinion on the case of Italy, on the gold of Italy, you state that the proposal interferes with the institutional and functional independence of Bank of Italy. You also conclude that the concrete purpose of the draft provision is unclear and that the authority cannot influence or direct how a central bank manages reserves. On this basis, you invite the Italian authority to reconsider the draft provision. But actually, the government is going ahead, and the gold held by the Bank of Italy represents a strategic national reserve, Could you explain, for the benefit of those who may have still some doubts, why such reserve cannot be used directly to finance, for instance, public spending or reduce debt, and what the role they instead play in the Eurosystem in assuring financial stability? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your question on Italian gold. It's not a trivial issue because Italy, as you know, is the third largest holder of gold amongst the family of central banks. So it's a key component of the reserves of Italy. And it's a very fresh topic for us because we did publish our opinion. It's dated December the 2nd. It's on our website. And I will spare you the multiple references to essentially Article 127 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union and Article 2.1, third indent of Council decision. So you have all the legal basis on which we are elaborating our opinion. That opinion, interestingly, echoes an opinion that we already rendered in 2019 with a similar question in relation to the title to the gold reserves. And it's interesting because when you look carefully at the treaty, and of course our legal services have done that both in 2019 and have done it yet again, is that there is no actual reference to the title to or the property of. This is not identified as such in the treaty. But what the treaty says very clearly is that the holding and the management of the reserves belong to the national central bank of each member state. And Banca d'Italia is not different from any other national central banks or any other member states. So Banca d'Italia has the duty to hold and manage those reserves. And, we go full circle since 2019. It hasn't changed at all, and it is the same opinion that we have issued and which really clarify very specifically that from a bookkeeping point of view, from a management point of view, from a distribution of results point of view, it is Banca d'Italia which has full authority. And I strongly refer you to the opinion of December the 2nd, which is already now published on our website and available for anybody to consult.
You want to follow up?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I just read it, and actually the majority is assuming that the French government is doing something similar. I have some doubt about that. Anyway, this could be as well something to clarify. Thank you.
What is the French government doing with that?
Well, the majority in Italy say that in France, actually, there is a similar thing as the provision of the budget law, of the amendment to the budget law. I have some doubt about that, in fact, but this was the answer of the majority.
Okay. Well, this is something that we will look into. I'm not aware of it. And we will look into it. But what I can tell you is that we stand very strongly on the opinion of December the 2nd, which essentially duplicates the opinion that we issued in 2019. And I don't think that there is anything that we wouldn't take out any word of it. But we'll look into it. Thank you for mentioning it.
Thank you. For ESM, Rada Lekova.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Lagarde, my question is concerning the increased gold purchases by central banks. In the recent years, we have seen a remarkable shift that central banks worldwide doubled their annual gold purchases between 2022 and 2024 compared with the average of the previous decade. So this scale of accumulation suggests a growing uncertainty, either regarding confidence in their own currency or in the stability of the US dollar and the euro as reserve assets. So my question is, what is your interpretation of the reasons behind this trend, and what implications do you foresee for the euro? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. And it is a fact that since 2022 there has been an increased movement of gold purchases by many central banks around the world, and particularly the PBOC, so the national central banks of China, has been a significant purchaser of gold. But central banks are not the only one. If you look at, I think, the largest purchaser of gold in the last year in particular is actually a company called Tether, which is a stablecoin issuer, which is clearly investing in something that has nothing to do with digital, but which is very tangible, in other words, gold reserves. What does that translate? What does that mean? I think you yourself gave the answer. When some investors are short of destination, are worried about their investment, and want to diversify their investment, generally that's a route that is taken. Thank you.
Do you want to follow up?
Yes, thank you. Additional to that trend, there are persistent reports that the BRICS countries may introduce a trade settlement mechanism backed by precious metals. And if this would be implemented, how could this affect the global attractiveness of the euro as a trade currency, particularly for the global south? And what would be the potential economic consequences for the Eurozone if that is to happen? Thank you.
Couple of things. One is, the fear of the BRICS is something that we have been living with for the last 15 years or so. From my days as managing director of the IMF, we were already under the alleged threat of the BRICS forming a subset of the international community, having their own infrastructure of payment, possibly having their own means of exchange, and setting up the international BRICS Bank. I observe that from a distance now, a bit more, but I have not seen a significant move and changes in that respect. Settlement by way of commodities, I'm not sure that this is something that would be a very stable mechanism, because commodities by nature vary extensively over the course of time in terms of value. So I don't see that as a major threat. Thank you.